close borders, so it was like looking at a completely different planet. But I want to show you which were these scenes, this intro of a scientific magazine, which really triggered the love in me for the polar regions. There is a sound with it. Honestly, I have no idea what I liked about it as a little girl, because I think it's more spooky than inviting. But somehow these were the first encounters what I had, and this was the footage that really triggered something in me, and I wanted to go to these places. It was exactly 10 years ago when I got my very first assignment from Sabine Meyer from Audubon magazine, going to the Arctic Ocean. And when I got this assignment, I knew this will change my life forever. Since then, I documented 27 scientific expeditions in the Arctic and Antarctica. And my goal is with my photography that I want to use photography to communicate about science, to communicate about the changing Arctic, which is the fastest changing environment on our planet. So I use photography with the help of big publication, to be able to bring it to publication, publishing them, bringing them to books or exhibitions or to talks. I started to walk in the footsteps of old, formal, pioneer polar explorers who I saw in the TV, in documentation or feature films, or seeing them in books. One of them was being in the footsteps of Fridtjof Nansen, Norwegian polar explorer, who was frozen with his ship this happened 130 years ago. He froze with his ship into the Arctic Ocean sea ice, drifting. He wanted to prove that there is a transpolar drift which transports 75% of the sea ice in the Arctic Ocean. He was right, there is something like that. And Polarstern expedition followed that same exact route. I was on this expedition for 3.5 months, and this triggered something else in me. I was already deeply in love with the Arctic, and this expedition made me be deeply in love also with the darkness. I find it somehow like really magical. The lights are very similar, being in the polar night and standing here on the stage, like having the spotlights from the ship feels like that. During Mosaic expedition, which was a 1-year-long expedition, I spent 3.5 months in the polar night on Polarstern, while the ship was drifting with the sea ice. Scientists worked every single day, 6 to 8 hours. I remember that day was minus 55 with wind chill, and we were the only people out there. It was snowstorm, and the bridge called us that we have to return because it's very dangerous already to stay out there, because they couldn't see any polar bears, and they couldn't secure or ensure our safety. Because there were polar bears, and we were in the land of polar bears, and every time I look at these pictures, for me it feels like the moon landing with polar bears. It felt like being on a moon. It felt like the sea ice looked like the surface of the moon, and it was constantly dark. Many days we had just clouds, so we didn't see the stars. It felt like being on a completely different planet. Scientists installed 500 tons of instruments on the sea ice, and this village around the ship, together with the ship, drifted with the sea ice. These scientific stations were connected with 2 kilometers of cable and data cable with the ship. The main reason for this expedition was this type of journey expedition never happened before. And I don't know when the next gonna happen. It was extremely complex, but scientists gathered very important base data from an environment which was never observed in the polar night, because during the winter time in the Arctic Ocean, you can get there only in this way, that you got frozen with the ship and starts to drift for an entire year, or you go there by skis, but with skis you cannot do such an intense and complex scientific work. Scientists wanted to understand the different connections between the atmosphere, between the snow, the sea ice, the ocean, and they wanted to understand if one element is changing, how all the others are changing. We can see here Jessie Creeman, scientist from the United States. She was gathering water samples from a lead, that's how it's called when the sea ice is opening. And the more lead we had, organisms in the microbes in the water help to create clouds. More clouds we have, the more snow falls. More snow we have, less sea ice is growing. And these connections, what scientists wanted to understand. Here we see a station which was measuring the snow depth and the sea ice depth. One trend, what is happening in the Arctic Ocean, is that there is more snow coverage, which, as I mentioned, it prevents sea ice from growth. Alison Fong cut an ice block in the ice to lower a fish camera to see what lives under the Arctic Ocean sea ice. Nobody knew it until this point. And what they found is they found Atlantic cod very close to the geographical North Pole. Atlantic cod, which lives in much warmer waters. That fish should not be there. But as warmer waters are entering the polar waters, invasive species or species which don't belong there come with these waters. Scientific research happened every single day in all storms. I remember it was minus 38 on that day, and scientists were gathering ice cores to see that as sea ice is melting, how much methane is sinking into the ocean and how much methane gets into the atmosphere. With every single journey, I tried to bring the expedition and all the knowledge out in the world on different platforms. So if you are interested for Mosaic, you can find it as a film, Arctic Drift, or you can find it in a book or different publications. Another very special expedition I joined was the endurance expedition, where the team of scientists wanted to find the lost ship of Sir Ernest Shackleton. It happened exactly 110 years ago as the ship sank in 1915 after being trapped in the sea ice and couldn't get out of the sea ice, and it got crashed and sank. The reason why Fram expedition and also Polarstern, why it didn't happen is because of the shape of the ship. Fram and also Polarstern has a shape like an almond, so when the sea ice is pushing it, the ship raises and can flip on one or the other side. Endurance was built in a very different way. It couldn't lift, so as the sea ice was coming stronger and stronger, it eventually crashed the ship. And this is the very last photograph from Frank Hurley, just 2 days before the ship sank. Already that time, photography was very important, and polar explorers realized that it's important that there is a photographer on board who documents the scientific or the achievement, what they did. And it was really an honor to feel and to be in the footsteps of Frank Hurley and feeling the spirit of this old expedition. We arrived to Antarctica, to the search area, on the birthday of Shackleton. The search for the ship happened with an underwater vehicle on this yellow instrument. We called it Ellie. Ellie was sent down to 3,000 meter depth to search for 8 hours. Then it came up to recharge for 3 hours, and then it went back again. During every single expedition, I'm very curious, who are the people living on the boat and what are they doing? And there was then a cadet who, if he was not on the working deck, in his cabin, he was doing tattoo art, and he also offered me to give me an endurance on my arm. I kind of refused it. We had Sim on board. Sim was a spiritual healer and also a cook, and every single evening at 10 p.m. he did a ritual of praying, to pray that we find the ship. She lit fire in her room, and she also called the bridge that the bridge turns off her fire alarm. I think if you are the captain of a ship, this is not what you really want to hear, that someone is lighting a fire in the cabin. But that's what she did, and the captain and the crew was so kind that she was allowed to do her daily rituals. We had a very big difference to Shackleton's expedition. We had a lot of parallels, but there was one big difference. We had women on board. During Shackleton's expedition, there were 3 women who desperately wanted to join, but Shackleton didn't allow this. And actually, until the 90s, until 1990s, in many fields of polar science, women were not allowed. Germany sent the first female team to Antarctica to overwinter in 1990. Before that, women even from Germany were not allowed. So it's not a wonder that I never see any female role model in front of me, because there were literally only men. So we had a really fantastic women on board. Carla, who was responsible for the weather service, Timberlichle, a cadet, or Sim, who was our cook. On the 5th day, something amazing happened. 3 a.m. in the morning, the entire ship was waken up by the captain of the ship announcing that we found Endurance. We were 120 people on board. Everyone woke up for the announcement in the loudspeaker. This has also a sound.
However, I'm
Go back.
expedition members. I know this is an inconvenient time to wake you up. However, I am delivering the good news to you all. The Endurance has been located. And our objective, everybody on board, has been achieved, and it calls for time for celebration. Thank you.
It was just amazing. Like in 5 days, we found the Endurance, the crew decorated the ship, and the captain also promised us that we all get 2 beers for celebration. It was a dry ship, so there were no alcohol actually for the whole time, 6 weeks. So getting an offer of 2 beers, everyone was very happy. But Ellie was sent down again to investigate the wreck, and it turned out it was not the ship. There was just like some piles of wood. I'm not sure if people were more disappointed about not getting the beer, or they were more disappointed not finding Endurance. But the search continued even during the wintertime, using satellite technology to navigate between the ice floes, not being the next Endurance expedition. The stress grew every single day on board, and we actually ran out of time. We got 4 weeks to find Endurance, and we didn't find it. But luckily, on the last day, on the day when we had to return, the founder of the expedition offered 2 more weeks, but maximum 40 more days to find the Endurance. So the search continued. Ellie was sent down for 8 hours, then sent back to charge, sent down again. And while it was happening, I was still interested, like, what is happening on board. And if Dan didn't do tattoos or didn't work on the deck, he also did really nice haircuts. And while I was photographing his artwork, I could hear on my radio that 2 of the expedition leaders were called to the control room of Ellie. GC, Nico, please come to the control room now. I knew that something is happening, because during the entire trip I never heard that both of them were called, and I was rushing to the control room as well. And there she was. We found the Endurance. We found Endurance on the 100-year anniversary of Sir Ernest Shackleton's funeral. On the way home, we stopped at South Georgia Island. That's where Sir Ernest Shackleton died, and that's where his graveyard is. And we delivered him the good news that we found his ship. If you are interested about this expedition, this was an assignment for the National Geographic, and if you're interested, there is a film about it, there is book, a publication, and even a podcast where you can hear a little bit from my diary, from what I was writing, my journey journal, what I was writing during this expedition. Another journey, what is very, very dear to my heart, and it's a project what is very close to my heart, is a project what I'm working on, Stars of Polar Night, right now in Svalbard. That takes me into the footsteps of Roald Amundsen, who crossed exactly 100 years ago with his airship Norge. He flew over the North Pole from New Orleans on Svalbard, Norway, to Teller, Alaska. This little town, New Orleans, is the northernmost community of the planet. During the winter time, 35-40 people lives there. There are no civilians. Everyone who lives there works for climate and environmental research. The mast, which was holding Norge, the airship, is still there. You can see it outside of the town. This town, New Orleans, was a mining town, and until the very last accident in town, which was actually in Esther mine, that's when the village, the mining era closed, and the village transformed from mining into science. Svalbard is the epicenter of global warming. Nowhere on the planet is the warming and the changes so fast than here. The winter average temperature is increasing by 6 to 8 Celsius since 1993. We know this because scientists from Alfred Wegener Institute launch a weather balloon every single day at 11 UTC in every weather, every holiday, every day. And this is the dedication what is really interests me, because if we want to understand climate change, it's not enough if you look at one day. We need scientists who dedicate their life, their entire life to one scientific topic, to look at one data over a very long period of time. The changes are not only in the atmosphere, the changes are also in the water. What scientists find here is the same what we found during Mosaic expedition, that invasive species are entering the polar waters. We can see here a helmet jellyfish. These jellyfish lives in the warmer waters, and the problem with the invasive species are that they eat faster, they reproduce faster, and they are destroying an entire ecosystem. The permafrost is thawing also at a very fast pace, making all infrastructure unstable, and houses and the basement and the whole structure of the houses has to be rebuilt to make it stable again and people can live there again. Because I never saw any role models in front of me, and because there are female scientists since the 90s in the polar regions, I decided that I want to highlight them, and I started to create a portrait series about them to show little girls like I was long time ago, my 6-year-old me, to show little girls that they can be anyone. If they have something, whatever topic in their heart, they can follow that dream and they can become that person. For example, Susanna, she's the leader of the Norwegian Mapping Authority. What we see here is an antenna which looks into the furthest galaxies 13 billion light year away. And these antennas looking into galaxies which doesn't exist anymore, but they position our Earth and can check any changes in the movement or in the changes in the direction of the X, or any movement which can have an effect on our climate. Or Julia, who is a snow scientist, and he's measuring how snow affects permafrost, because snow affects sea ice, and sea ice grows much slower, but snow affects also permafrost. The more snow we have, the less permafrost we have, and the faster it is thawing. Or Joanna, who is a polar bear scientist, and she wants to understand how the changing snow coverage on Svalbard affects polar bear maternity and polar bear dance. There is a new phenomenon in Svalbard that during the wintertime it is raining. I experienced this many times. On days when it should be minus 25, it is +0 or +2, and it is raining, and all the rain washes away the snow, and there is nothing else but just a mirror, a frozen mirror on the ground, which was, of course, very bad, for example, for reindeers, because they cannot graze, they cannot cut through that very strong ice layer. Apolline, who was the logistic engineer in the town supporting scientists coming here. Or Siv, who is a pastor coming here to town where people live between 1.5 years to 10 years without their family and friends. It is purely, this town is purely dedicated to work, and you cannot come here with your family. So it's very important that there is one person like Siv who locals who live there and work there can talk to. Or Katie Sives, who is a microbiologist, and she's not running around like this during her field work, but she had this costume with her. And when I heard it, I asked her, why do you have Elsa costume with you? And she said, because Elsa is a very important inspirational character for her in her private life and also in her science. And she said, because strong females can achieve many things. This is the last picture. I want to finish my talk, and I think this is my favorite photograph from my 27 expeditions, and I think it summarizes also how I feel about this beautiful land. It's my love for the darkness, my love for the cold, and also it shows scientists who are, for me, truly stars of the polar night, scientists who gives us understanding, who gives us facts to really understand what is happening in the Arctic, in the fastest changing environment on Earth, in the Arctic, which completely influences our climate. And they are the one who gives us something in our hand and informations in our hand. And it is in our hand to decide what we do with it. I get many times the questions like, what is my suggestion or what we can do? I truly believe that we can do important decisions in our personal life every single day for a healthy planet. But it is also in our hands to stand up and choose leaders and decision makers who want us and want generations to come to live on a healthy planet. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.